Job's going well. Carol spoke into the smartphone lying on the floor beside her, without taking her eyes off the corner of the basement she was facing. I haven't run into any problems yet. So, let's hope it stays that way. The house itself is interesting, to be honest. It really is a historically bad place, as the seller said. I'm kind of amazed others haven't flocked to it yet to solve its mysteries. There's enough going on here to fill up whole books. From simple cold spots to real death echoes. We have at least a dozen spirits in here, many of them manifested, drifting around their own rooms or the whole house. I haven't seen anything like this in years. There are a few notable ones too. You would probably like them. The Shy Kid, for example. It's the spirit of a boy, maybe 8 years old, and he's been staring at me since I started, hiding close by and not letting me out of his sight. I haven't managed to establish a connection with him yet, but I think I might get something out of him before he's finally pacified. Then, there are the ones you'd probably hate with a passion. The butler, for example. It seems we have a ghost who tries to ingratiate himself with anyone entering the home. He's been quiet, but he keeps following me wherever I go. Maybe he knows I'm here to help, or maybe it's something like his spirit instinct, telling him to stick to any living being. Then, there's the Wailing Lady. I've started calling her that because I can hear her pretty much once every hour, crying somewhere in the house, then flitting past. Maybe she lost something as she died? Probably right. If I knew what, I might actually help her, if only to get a few hours of rest for once. She's been annoying but harmless, so you don't have to worry about me. As if you ever would. Carol stared straight ahead. The corner of the basement was strange. The longer she looked at it, the weirder it got. It felt almost like the walls were overlapping there, at least a tiny bit. Somehow it reminded her of some kind of glitch in a video game. This phenomenon wasn't very common, but sometimes presences could mess with one's perception, elongating hallways or shrinking down rooms. And this one looked like two instances of exactly that happening, overlapping right in front of her. The right side was stretching, the left side shrinking, giving the corner this strangely alive feeling, as if it were breathing. How many spirits had to be here to create that kind of effect? Well, truly, it wasn't about numbers, but about the apparitions themselves. 100 weak ones wouldn't be able to do something like this, while 1 or 2 strong ones just might create a phenomenon like that simply by their presence. She had seen enough of them to know that they could be completely unpredictable. Carol took a step back, walked closer to the phone, and then continued her one-sided conversation. The talismans are all in place, so I don't think I'll need to worry too much about those spirits. A few days and they will start dissolving on their own. And in a week's time, the house should be pacified. If you want, I can try and find out why so many different spirits have ended up here, but I don't think you care too much, right? She already knew the answer to that question. Her sister and business partner, well, boss, if she was honest, only had eyes for one thing, and it definitely wasn't the spirits they were clearing out of homes. As long as the house was cheap when bought, then pacified within a month, she wouldn't care a single bit about how Carol managed it. On one hand, that gave her a certain kind of freedom, but on the other, it left her hanging. She would love to spend more time with those things if she was honest. Finding out their life stories, researching them. It would be fascinating and would help make this whole thing go smoother if she could. But, as her sister liked to remind her from time to time, she wasn't paid for that. All she needed to do was clear the houses of apparitions and supernatural forces, then hand back the key so they could fix it up and then flip it. Carol grumbled, then reached out and touched one spot on the wall. Paint crumbled, followed by plaster. A cloud of dust rose up as small cracks appeared in the wall behind it. Strange vibrations seemed to flow through the floor as the building started to shake. Carol felt it. This wasn't an earthquake, but something spiritual. A cold chill made the nape of her neck tingle. She looked and watched a spot on the wall in front of her crumble to dust and rain down. It looked like a dark eye, crying tears of ash. Carol felt the tingling in her neck getting worse. She wasn't one of those firebrand, wannabe rock star spiritualists who were willing to throw themselves headfirst into any danger to get famous. No. Ever since she had discovered her gift and received her teachings, she had followed one simple rule. If it looks dangerous, run away and let someone else take over. And this dark eye staring right at her seemed far too ominous to simply ignore. Carol knelt down, picked up her phone, and held it right in front of her face. I think I just found something incredibly unsettling. You better send someone else to finish this job. I'm getting out of here as soon as I possibly can. She looked around, then back at the wall. The dark eye was staring at her, now no longer crying. Carol felt a chill running through her legs, wandering up and into her whole body. It's 6:30 now. Get someone in here by tomorrow, 4:00 p.m., so they can take over. I'll leave my talismans up until then. If you haven't found anyone, I'll leave anyway. That is non-negotiable. With those words, she cut the call and took a shallow breath. Her legs were trembling under the gaze of that strange black eye. She could imagine a whole bunch of things that could have happened in this house to make it like this. A ritual suicide spot, some kind of cult, a hidden graveyard, and not one of them sounded like something she wanted to get involved in. Why were there so many spirits here? Well, the answer seemed to be staring at her right now. Carol forced herself to take a step, then stopped just as abruptly. She knew what she should do, and that was to get back up to the room she was sleeping in, where she had put out all her charms and trinkets, and hide out until tomorrow at 4:00. But something inside of her stirred. The black eye, no, the hole in the wall was just a few steps away, and since it had crumbled, the strange spiritual distortions had stopped as well. Even if she didn't care about fame and the like, she at least wanted to know what had happened. There was no smell of sulfur or blood in the air, so there shouldn't be an apparition capable of hurting her directly. Carol tried to calm herself down. The foundation of knowledge, especially in the mystic arts, was curiosity, wanting to understand the world around oneself. And right now, she had a chance to see something she had never seen before. Just a quick glance, Carol thought to herself. It couldn't hurt. She stepped closer and smelled the air coming out of the new hole in the wall. The odor reminded her of something she hadn't thought about in a long time. Her teacher's library. Back then, she had smelled the same things as right now. It was the odor of old books, wood, and ink. If she had caught even a whiff of anything dangerous, she would have run away. Carol knew. It was better to be a coward for 5 minutes than dead after all. She raised the phone in her hand, turned on the flashlight, and shone it right into the eye. For a moment, she thought she could see dust in the air, forming a circle that made it look like an iris. A shiver ran down her spine, but she shook her head and the sight disappeared. No, this wasn't a bad omen, Carol told herself, even though she could feel herself trembling again as she took another step. It was nothing but a trick of the light. She reached the eye-shaped hole, took a deep breath, then pointed the light of her phone right at it. There was a whole other room inside, she quickly realized, then watched dust swirling around there, blocking the sight of the floor. Carol looked at the ceiling and the walls of that room. They weren't neat or tidy. It seemed like someone had dug this place without any kind of heavy machinery or building permit. She felt her heart racing. There was no light in there, not even paint on the walls. Was this the reason so many spirits had converged here? Well, there needed to be something in there that had drawn them in. She looked down again at the swirling mass of dust moving now like waves going back and forth from wall to wall. There was a certain energy to this room that Carol absolutely didn't like. She felt like she was looking at a graveyard, and not one of those well-kept modern ones. Her whole body was shaking as she stood there and waited for the dust to settle. There still was no stench of blood or sulfur, at least, she thought, and tried to smile. The waves in the room were getting smaller, and Carol felt the tension rising. In the light of her phone, she could see some objects sticking out already. Dark, rectangular, and with a grain pattern. Wooden boxes, and small ones at that. She felt her heart beating faster. There were at least a dozen of them in there, neatly arranged in rows. Carol swallowed the words on her tongue as she watched the dust finally settle, giving her a clear view of the room. Each and every one of the boxes stood on a stone slab, and each stone slab had letters carved into it. With the dust settling all around the boxes, Carol couldn't exactly make out what stood there, but she had a pretty good idea what it might be. Names. On the closest one, she could see an A, followed by an N, then a few more covered up letters, and at the end, 2 numbers. 23. There weren't that many spirits here, right? No, it had to mean something different. Carol looked around. There were 2 slabs with the number 21 and one with 8. She thought about it more deeply. Her instinct told her that this might actually be the age of the person when they had died, which meant inside the boxes there would be remains, right? A shiver ran through her at the thought. Whoever had dug this room out of the ground had been a collector. Someone who stole body parts. Had he worked in a cemetery or maybe a hospital? Carol didn't know. She wasn't even sure if she wanted to. The light of her smartphone flickered once, and suddenly she felt ice-cold air touching her face. Carol looked through the room again. Row after row of remains in polished wooden boxes, standing on slabs with names and ages engraved on them. This was a bad sign, a really, really bad one. She could hear the wailing woman far off and felt at least 3 spirits staring at her from behind. The light flickered again as it wandered through the small hidden room. There, in the farthest corner, something else stood. A box, bigger than all the others. It almost looked like a coffin. The wailing woman gave off another groan, and Carol stepped back immediately. This feeling of someone's cold hand brushing past her neck made her hair stand on end, as she cursed at herself in her thoughts. Right now wasn't the time to be too curious, she told herself, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a whole bunch of talismans she had brought along. 6 of them should be enough, right? Quickly, Carol stuck them to the wall in a well-practiced pattern and finally felt the strange energy surrounding her subsiding. Whoever her sister brought in after her could deal with this room. The charms she had put up would seal whatever was in there long enough to give her time to get swapped out. Carol stepped back but kept staring at the wall. The hole still looked like a dark eye, and now the talismans were framing it. This place was definitely too ominous for her. She could feel the gaze of the shy kid on her back, turned, and managed to catch a glimpse of the young-looking spirit immediately hiding behind the corner. Yeah, tomorrow at 4 p.m. she would get out of here and leave this place behind. Carol whirled around and briskly walked back up the stairs and toward the room she had put her stuff in. The spirits kept following her. She could feel their presence all around the house. She finally reached her room, walked in, shut the door behind her, and felt their gazes disappear. Finally, a moment of peace, she thought to herself, and looked around. It probably used to be a proper bedroom, but right now, all that was in there was her sleeping bag, her travel bag, and a backpack full of cans of food and water. She had put up another set of charms here to stop spirits from entering this place, so she could have a safe haven from the potential chaos outside. A soft sigh escaped her, because after seeing that room, she really needed a break. Carol sat down on the sleeping bag, pulled out her phone again, and tried to get her mind off of what was happening outside her door right now. They were probably standing around and waiting for her to come back out. Well, who could blame them? She was, after all, the first person in years that had come here. And from a spirit's perspective, she had to be far more interesting than normal people. After all, she could see them, knew about them, and, at least for the most part, treated them with respect. They weren't evil or bad, just stuck here. At least for another few days. She had prepared the whole house when she had first gotten here. The talismans she had put on the walls were meant to drain them of their energy until they finally passed on. It would take a few days, maybe even a week, for all of them to find peace. Usually, that was. Only, with the room she had found down there, things might get complicated. If it truly was the work of some collector who knew about spirits, he could have put something into the house to keep them here, talismans or no. That could spell real trouble for her or people in her profession. Anything that messed around with that stuff could turn normal spirits feral, and there were enough cases of situations that turned deadly because of it. She shivered and hugged her knees to her chest. Just one day, Carol promised herself. Tomorrow she would leave and never look back. She put her chin on her knees and stared at the screen of her phone. Normally, she would start reading something and lose herself in it. But right now, that simply didn't happen. No matter what she did, her thoughts always returned back to the room she had seen. The small boxes on the slabs. The big one in the back. A chill ran down her spine at the thought. Someone had gone to great lengths to set something like that up. What was its purpose? She had a few ideas, but nothing concrete. It could have been the work of a madman or some strange experiment. Maybe the person who had lived here before was a descendant of some kind of witch or shaman. Or they could have simply found some old book and tried out a few spells. It was maddening not knowing what was going on below her. just calm down and take a deep breath," Carol whispered to herself, still balancing her chin on her knee. She opened her mouth to take a breath, then suddenly stopped. The floor she was sitting on was moving. Ever so slightly, it vibrated. Carol looked around. Was it an earthquake? Her eyes drifted toward the window and the trees standing outside in the setting sun. Birds were sitting there on the branches. No earthquake, she thought. That meant something else was going wrong. Carol felt the tension in the air as she put one palm against the floor. The vibrations were getting stronger. If it wasn't an earthquake, what could it be? She already knew the answer, but didn't want to say it. This might be something connected to that damned room. Her throat went completely dry as she thought about it. No, it couldn't be. Right? She hadn't felt anything especially powerful down there when the room had opened. Her palm pressing against the floor was slick with sweat. Could something have been hidden down there? She shook her head, but her instincts were still screaming. Would it be better to leave right now? No, she couldn't do that. There was no telling what would happen if no one was here. And if her sister sent another professional here, they would need to know what they were walking into. She had given her word. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Carol grumbled, then felt the vibrations stop as suddenly as they had started. She kept her hand on the floor anyway, trying to feel something, anything at all, but couldn't. There was no electricity in the air, no hum running through the floor. She hadn't heard any strange noises either, if she now thought about it. No screaming, no howling, no bang. As if on cue, the wailing woman started up her routine again, groaning outside her door. Carol smiled softly. She felt relieved. It probably was either just a tiny earthquake or some construction site nearby shaking the ground. Carol took a deep breath and then heard the wailing woman again. This time, it sounded more like a scream instead of her typical groan. She held her head to the side to listen closely. It wasn't coming from right by the door either. Another scream in the voice of the wailing woman reached her ears. Carol pushed herself off the ground and stood up. She had heard her often enough to know her pretty well. But that sound right now had definitely not been one of sorrow, but of fear. Without thinking too much, she quickly crossed the room and ended up by the door where she had hung one of her talismans. She pressed her ear against the wood and heard another scream. Something was wrong. Carol pulled the door open and looked out. The first thing she realized was that not a single one of the spirits was still there. They weren't waiting for her anymore. A cold breeze blew past her face as another scream filled the house. This time she had heard it clearly. Her head snapped to the side. She looked and could suddenly see something by the open door to the basement. It was the figure of the wailing woman. Her sorrowful face, normally hidden by her hands, was now uncovered. She was holding onto the doorframe as two long, dark arms snaked around her figure, trying to pull her down the stairs. Carol was frozen in shock as she watched. Usually, spirits didn't interact with each other. At least not in here. She heard the wailing woman scream, then saw her hand slip off as she got pulled down into the basement. A painful sting pierced her heart as she watched. This wasn't a prank. Something had just taken one of the spirits. She could see the shy kid hiding to her right, kneeling on the floor with its back pressed against the wall. This was the first time she could see it so clearly. Because it wasn't hiding from her anymore. Carol's legs were trembling as suddenly, from below, footsteps reached her ears. They were heavy and coming up the stairs. She could feel the chill deep in her bones as all her instincts screamed at her to get away. The big wooden box came to her mind. Was this what had been in there? She could hardly think straight as suddenly this big, shadowy figure appeared. Its hands grabbed the frame of the door as if it had to heave itself upward. Then the head, round and shadow-like, followed. This thing had to bend down to fit through the frame. But as soon as it spotted her, it froze as well. Carol couldn't see its eyes, but she felt them. There was a hunger in there she had never experienced before. The giant took a step toward her, and Carol jumped back, then threw the door shut. A roar filled the house as suddenly footsteps thundered over the floor, coming straight at her. Carol grabbed a bundle of charms and talismans from her pocket, stuck them to the inside of the door, and braced her arms against it. It was coming. This thing. She needed to call her sister and warn her. One hand left the door and dove into her pocket, and at that exact moment, the thing outside reached her. It hit the door with a deafening thud. Carol stumbled backward and fell, her eyes glued to the charms and talismans still hanging up there. They were shaking, but not in the rhythm of the door. Carol wanted to scream. What was that thing? It definitely wasn't a normal spirit. If it broke through, she'd get dragged into the basement as well. Another thud filled the room as it threw itself against the entrance, almost shaking it from its hinges. Carol could see it. 2 of the charms were starting to smoke. They were keeping it back. She jumped up again, grabbed more from the bundle, and threw herself forward. The stench of burning paper and metal filled her nostrils as a flame flickered up from one of the charms stuck to the door, while outside the thing growled like a wounded beast. Carol grabbed each and every one of those exact charms she still had with her, almost hammered them into the wood, and heard the thing throwing itself against the door again. The thud was so loud she jerked back. Another charm caught on fire, and a puff of smoke shot up toward the ceiling. They had to hold, somehow. She heard the thing out there growling again, its voice tinged with anger. What the hell had she set free? Carol pulled out her phone. Her sister had to send someone stronger, older, and far more experienced. Someone who could exorcise this thing. She turned on her phone, only half looking at the screen, but immediately saw it glitching, the colors flowing into each other as static filled up the display. Carol groaned, then listened. In her panic, she hadn't noticed. The thing out there had gone silent. It hadn't attacked the door again. Instead of feeling relief, Carol thought she couldn't breathe anymore from the tension. There was no growling or scraping out there, no hissing or whispering. The house on the other side of the door was completely silent. Only her own heartbeat was drumming in her ears. Carol felt her mouth go dry. It couldn't have simply disappeared. No. This felt more like the eye of the storm. A short break before something even worse would happen. Her legs were shaking so badly that she had to grab hold of the door to steady herself. This wasn't what she had signed up for. All she wanted to do right now was leave, run away, and never look back. She tried to take shallow breaths to hide her own noises as she listened. The silence outside was almost more threatening than the growling she had heard before. It was like this thing was waiting for something. Maybe it thought she would open the door and look outside? Carol scoffed in her mind. This door would stay closed until either this thing disappeared completely or her sister could send a real professional her way. She still had enough charms lying around to keep this monster out for a time, as long as the entrance stayed shut. Carol closed her eyes for a moment and listened again. This thing still had to be there, right? It would wait for her. Just as she had the thought, a new scream filled the house. This one wasn't from the wailing woman, but from a child, and Carol's mind immediately turned to the shy kid. It was crying out and fell silent as heavy footsteps moved toward the basement. Carol felt another stinging pain in her chest. This monster had chosen a new victim, one of the other spirits. It could be a trick, she told herself. No, even if it was real, there was nothing she could do. Going out there to save some apparition? No way, that was definitely not something she would do. She heard the kid scream again, and her heart almost broke. The heavy footsteps descended the stairs, and with them, the crying died out. Carol took her hand from the door, walked back to her sleeping bag, and sat down. She was burying her face in her hands to keep her mind steady. It wasn't her fault, she told herself. There was nothing she could have done, whatever this thing was. It was at that moment that she heard the loud bang. Only this time, it didn't come from the door, but from below. Carol felt it, the vibrations running through the floor and up into her body. She jumped up, heard the next hit, and then got hit by this sinking feeling. Her legs were shaking, but this time it wasn't simply her nerves. With a scream, she realized that the floor beneath her feet was sagging, then giving way. She felt her shoes breaking through the thin wooden boards and smelled the odor of dust rising to her nostrils. With a crunch, the whole floor seemed to sag, then break, then fall. She screamed again as she saw the hole opening up beneath her feet, tried to jump to the side, but her shoes were already slipping, and she fell. With an ear-splitting crash and a cloud of dust, the floor plunged into the basement. Carol knew she would have been buried beneath the rubble if she hadn't reached out at the last second and grabbed hold of something sticking out of the jagged edge of the hole. A pipe, now bent out of shape and trickling water, had saved her life. She looked into the abyss that had almost swallowed her and could see that the light had completely gone out down there. The only source of illumination was coming from above, the bulb hanging in the room where she had put her stuff. It wasn't bright enough to penetrate the cloud below, but Carol could see something in there. A figure was moving, walking from side to side. She knew what it was. The one from the big box. Maybe it was the spirit of the one who had built that damn room. Only now it was looking for more. For her. She groaned and heard the pipe she was hanging from aching, then suddenly noticed the stare again. This cold feeling gripped her as she realized that the thing was now looking straight at her. A hand shot out of the cloud and toward her. Carol screamed as she pulled herself up at the pipe, reached out and grabbed hold of the edge of the hole. She struggled as suddenly something cold and hard grabbed her ankle. Its grip was strong enough to make her scream. She kicked at it and felt a reverberation up her leg. The thing was pulling at her, trying to force her down into the abyss, and she already knew what would happen if she fell. Its hunger was permeating the air. Carol cried out, "Let go!" and pulled out the last few talismans still in her pocket. One of them had to work. She threw them down at the thing in the cloud of dust with a scream and felt her fingers slipping. The hand holding onto her from below tightened its grip, and Carol felt the bones in her ankle scraping against each other. As the bundle of talismans disappeared in the cloud, she felt her own heart skip a beat. It would pull her down, she knew. Then she suddenly heard a hissing sound as a bright flame shot up through the dust and toward her face. The hand around her ankle disappeared as a growl came up from below. Carol knew this was her only chance. She pulled herself up, ignored the pain as splinters burrowed into her palm from the broken edge of the hole, and then finally managed to heave her body out of the abyss and roll over the floor. There was no time for celebration. Carol could hear the monster screaming down below, its rage now swallowing its hunger. The massive hole spanned almost the whole room. It would come up here as well. As if to prove her right, she saw a dark hand grabbing hold of the edge, and a second one joining. Carol looked around. The door was on the other side of the hole. Jumping over it would be suicide. No, she turned, pulled in her arm, and struck her elbow against the window. Sharp shards of glass sprayed everywhere, but Carol didn't even register them. She took aim, hit again, and felt more of the pain breaking. In her back, the monster growled. A cold chill gripped her. Carol closed her eyes, grabbed the lower frame of the window, ignored the pain, and jumped. Something sharp cut into her body. Tiny shards stuck in her flesh. The monster howled somewhere behind her. The pain broke as she threw her body against it, and she felt a breeze before she finally fell. Carol screamed as her shoulder hit the lawn outside in a rain of shards. Then she rolled over. As she looked up, she could see the dark figure appearing in the window, its hand trying to reach through the broken glass. But the moment it left the house, the shadow began to smoke as if on fire. It was bound to this place. Carol felt relieved, but still scooted back, away from the house. Her phone started vibrating. 17 missed calls, all from her sister. She sighed as she tried to get up and felt the shooting pain in her ankle and burning cuts all over her body. They would have to burn this place to the ground, she thought. Through the broken window, Carol could see the shadowy figure standing there, its hands moving along the frame, looking for a way to get her. She shivered as she felt its gaze, the pain and hunger it exuded. This place wasn't meant for humans, she thought, as she hobbled away, unlocked her phone, and called the number on her screen.